Hi everyone, we are today with an interview about the adults of the Therian community. Can you introduce yourself shortly, please?
My name is Alan. I'm a psychological alterhuman and a polytherian. My theriotypes are the common raven, Spanish fighting bull, various hyenas, and various cervidae.
Hello, my name is TigerAcolyte. I am 33 years young. I'm a tiger Therian.
My online handle is Blackpaws. I've been in the community for a very long time now.
I'm WolfVanZandt. I currently live in Colorado in the United States, and I am a retired rehabilitation specialist from Alabama.
How would you describe your therianthropic experiences as a Therian yourself?
They are quite integrated into my everyday life and are an ever-present factor in the way I function. I also prefer the umbrella term alterhuman to describe my experiences, as my theriomythic experiences overlap with my therianthropic ones. Sometimes my sympath traits also come into the mix.
My experiences come and go, usually encouraged by certain activities or states of mind. Experience M and pH shifts.
I am currently a Therian. Back in the 70s, I started splitting, having personality dissociations. Got up to 9 in 1978. They all integrated, and since then, I haven't shifted. So I'm all wolf. I will have a dream as a wolf, or I will have a dream as a human. But I don't shift within the dream. I don't ever experience a change phase from one to the other.
When did you join the Therian community?
I found the alterhuman community through running into cringe content, as much as I hate to admit that. This was in high school. I forgot about it for several months after, and then it caught my attention a second time after graduation. It took a third exposure in my early 20s, this time to some alterhuman positive content for me to do serious research. I learned what it really meant to have those experiences, and I became an advocate for acceptance of alterhumanity. Shortly thereafter, also accepting that I too belonged under that umbrella.
I found out about the Therian and other community when I was 20. I discovered the term when I found otherkin.net in my quest to find a significant other that had similar tiger issues going on.
I've always had an interest in, werewolves and transforming. When I went to college, some friends of mine there introduced me to the internet. One of the options available back then is Usenet. One of them was alt horror werewolves, and I joined that. I was interested in discussing what I thought would be their appearances in movies and TV shows and comic books and so on. What I found instead was a bunch of folks who believed, on some level, they were wolves and bears and various other animals. By all rights, I should have just thought this was a pack of weirdos and moved on. But instead, I got really interested in it because I didn't feel like I was a part of that community. Not until I joined the IRC Internet Relay Chat channel for Alt Horror Werewolves.
It was in 1999. I was looking for some backgrounds for my website, and I ran into Snow Wolf's personal website. I asked the question that just about all Therians ask, where are all the other Therians? And his answer was, there's probably 1,000 in Alabama. And I checked it out, and sure enough, you can't swing a dead cat by the tail without hitting a Therian dead there. My first computer contact was on a friend's computer with the WhereNet, which was a chat.
How long have you been aware of your therianthropic experiences?
I really noticed that some of my own feelings were different from other children when I turned 8 or 9. Other kids were outgrowing playing pretend. They lost the urge to sound and act like dogs and dinosaurs, but I never lost the sense that it felt right to do so, even well into my teenage years.
I joined the IRC Internet Relay Chat channel for Alt Horror Werewolves. The folks I was close to there started saying, hey, you're still here. Maybe you should think about whether you might be Therian yourself. They kept suggesting it. One of them in particular, she sent me a drawing she made of what she thought I might look like as a fox. As soon as I saw it, there was some part of me that was connecting with that image, considering this was the first, really focused therianthropic experience I had ever felt.
I've been aware of these experiences since 17 or 18-ish. 13 or 14 if you count former otherkin experiences that tie in somewhat.
Were you part of a community when you were also a young adult, or maybe even child, teenager, or...
I was not in the community as a minor. Entering it as an adult was strange. I felt like I had missed out on years of community that might have helped me along had I discovered it sooner.
At the time, I was only a part of Werelist as a young adult. I don't believe there was terribly much difference. Perhaps a bit rougher and guarded, but not so much as to make me feel uneasy.
A lot of it has to do with the state of the internet as it is now than it was back then. That, in a weird way, sort of limited the types of people I interacted with back then. I probably would not have come into the community as blind as I was then, nowadays, because there are just so many resources.
There was no were community up until 1994. I knew that I was a werewolf back in the early 70s, and I was open about it in college. And I also had a large library that I could dig into, but I had no indication that there were other wares.
Is the ratio between youngsters and adults in a community right now a good ratio?
The ratio of minors to adults, both in the community online and in local communities, is certainly unbalanced. There's a significant younger presence that I believe is caused by a few things. I believe this is primarily due to the availability of information to more people who are now growing up in a less culturally restricted environment.
I don't believe there's an ideal young versus old ratio besides the traditional 50-50 to hedge bets. At this moment, perhaps there are more young than old, and we may need more old to balance it out.
I definitely feel like there is a generational disconnect. The folks, coming into the community have gotten younger and younger. As for ratios go, it might be a little tilted towards the young people.
I'm a nature person.
Yeah.
I trust nature to do the right thing. If you stress nature in one place, then it will move things around until that stress is resolved.
I was also wondering if, in your opinion, if there is a rift between youngsters and adults.
There is definitely a rift between adults and the younger crowd within in-person communities. Online, this is usually rectified with decent platform moderation and a code of respect that members of online spaces should be held to regardless of age. The problem with communities that meet in person is the very large stigma that comes with adults interacting with minors. There are different maturity levels, different life goals, and overall different interests at play for both parties. Rule of thumb, 25-year-olds tend not to want to hang out or be best friends with people 10 years their junior outside of mentorship type arrangements.
I do believe there is a rift growing between old and young. It is being cultivated and guarded, perhaps not intentionally, but incidentally at the very least. It is logical to assume, as human tendency toward tribalism suggests, that like will group with like. As such, the young will tend toward other young in their words, and vice versa with the old. One might liken it to comparing a small village to a city. A village is small enough that most individuals are friendly with and see themselves as a group. But the city is a village that has grown too large to effectively associate with everyone in it.
The range of people and the range of platforms there are is so much different than it was back when I first got on. I think that, sort of difference in experience is where a lot of the rift comes in.
I think that there are spots in the online community where there is a rift. I've never seen it in the offline community. In the online community, I sort of had a blow up with a where list. Coyote left it and another administration came in. And one thing that I heard was, you old Therians need to move out of the way and let us new Therians run things. The big problem was it wasn't old and new. It was Therians that had a particular worldview and Therians that had another kind of worldview.
Do you feel like an adult, personally?
I feel like an adult in nearly every aspect of my life, not just in terms of my ultra humanity.
My feelings of being an adult stem directly from seeing others act in ways that deviate from reason and logic. Age plays no role.
It's kind of weird. I felt like an insider and an outsider at the same time. I simultaneously also feel like an adult because of my age, but at the same time, because I don't feel like I'm spiritually advanced as most of the other people, I still feel like I'm learning.
So do you think there are more flaws at being an adult or more advantages at being an adult?
I do think it's a good thing to be in these spaces and still feel like an adult. One should never lose sight of their own proper age group. Just like children shouldn't enter an adult-dominated space and begin trying to act like adults despite their natural lack of experience and maturity, by remembering myself as an adult, I can act as a mentor and as a guide for them.
I wouldn't say it's a good thing. We assign labels like adult and normal like they hold power, when in reality the only power they have is the powers others give them.
I mean, I very much appreciated having a group of peers I can, more easily relate to. But at the same time, it also leads to a certain amount of what we call balkanization, separation of sub-communities into their own little isolated worlds. That's very easy to do on the internet these days. And it happens that I'm missing out on something that could potentially be important or potentially be enlightening or entertaining or whatever.
It's not really an advantage of age. You may have heard the expression, it's not the years, it's the mileage. Okay, well, I've had a lot of mileage.
Have you ever noticed a change over time in your involvement in the Therian community?
My involvement in the community was rather average when I first joined. I disappeared for a few years, then came back and resumed. Only in the last year or so has my involvement in the community spiked.
I usually mostly listen, maybe interject something if it happens to cross into my experience. As I've gotten older, I almost feel more pressure to do so. Come on, I've been around for over 20 years.
I live with Badger. He has sort of taken up the mantle. He's very active, meeting with other Therians, being on panels, developing howls. I do as much as I can, but I just can't do as much as I used to.
Have you ever noticed that people have begun treating you differently compared to the past? Maybe related to your age or...
I have not noticed any change in how I've been treated in the community as I got older.
Well, I personally haven't. I'm sort of a private person. I'm not the type to necessarily reach out on my own.
Slightly. I've been called graybeard, which is true. Graybeard. And I've been called elder. And it's sort of embarrassing, honestly. I appreciate the thought. And I don't see a lot of age idolatry that I can sometimes see in the mainstreamer community. And I'm glad. We don't need real strong hierarchies in the Therian community. And
is there actually a difference between how youngsters treat you compared to adults?
Yes, I find the younger crowd tends to be more cautious when approaching me online as an adult.
Perhaps to some degree there is, but by and large I would not say I'm treated much differently by younger folks than I am by folks my age.
We have gray muzzles here. I mean, my warehouse is Coyote and Badger. We're all pretty experienced with the Therian community. People visit us simply because they know our names online. But once they get here, I hope that they find out that there's not that much of a difference as far as level is concerned.
Did the mentality or opinion or focus of the youngsters Therians change towards the adults?
It's possible to come in these days with a lot more knowledge and on a more, even footing than it was. And I'm sure that has to change some of the ways the generations interact. I can't imagine that doesn't have an effect.
HWW, if you've read any of the posts, they were more concerned about how Therians should behave in the world. Their questions were a lot more substantial than what should I be wearing. Of course, they were interested in what is my theriotype, but they didn't want to break it down to the subspecies. I don't see that much offline. This focus on expressing yourself as a Therian very extremely, we've never had that.
Have you ever been excluded out of a group chat, a pack, a forum, a website because of your age?
I have seen exclusion rules for some packs or spaces and communities, and I think this is healthy and important. While unity is definitely important for all alter humans, I think we also need spaces where we can go to feel safe among our own age groups.
I have not been excluded from any pack or site due to age, though I have not made many attempts to join across communities.
I personally haven't.
Not that I know of.
Do you or don't you get along better with Therians of your own age?
I do get along better with Therians my own age or older in a friend context. While speaking with minors in particular, I take on a mentor-tutor mindset. This isn't to say I don't enjoy interacting with them though. I love teaching. I also find that they have a lot of knowledge to teach in return, so it's never a bad idea to say a friendly hello to whoever you can, regardless of age.
Generally, I get along better with individuals my age, but I have made friends with those that are young. I attribute my preferences less to age itself and more to do with emotional stability and maturity of the individual.
I do, but I think a large reason of it is because my first instinct is to assume that the older somebody is, the more likely they are to have something I can learn from.
My own age? No, not really. Well, there aren't that many Therians my own age. A lot of the younger Therians that visit, I like being around them. There's one that lives 30 miles north. He comes down occasionally and hikes with me.
Do you secretly like being an adult in the Therian community?
I do like being an adult in the community, if only because being a teenager was an absolute nightmare for me. But in all seriousness, I do wonder if being a younger member these days would be easier just to make more friends, especially locally, just because it seems like there are so many more younger members out there.
No more or less than a person enjoys having an extra molecule in their body.
I get a little nervous sometimes that there are certain expectations of me, because of my age. But at the same time, I kind of appreciate that I do have the life experiences that I have and be able to talk with a wider variety of people.
Do you consider yourself actually a Gray Muzzle?
No, I do not consider myself a Gray Muzzle. I see this term as one to be used more for those who've spent a fair amount of time in the community, like 10 plus years maybe.
I do not consider myself a Gray Muzzle. To me, Gray Muzzles are defined by age, not necessarily experience or wisdom, though the incidence of those two attributes would be high.
To me, it implies both a bit about age, also a lot about how much of your own experience you can share with other people. I only feel like I meet the criteria in terms of age.
Well, I am a Gray Muzzle. Some people think that Gray Muzzle is a term of derision. They're making fun of people when they say that. I've never run into that. Usually when somebody calls me a Gray Muzzle, it's because I'm older, period. Sometimes there's a little bit of respect connected to it.
Your therianthropic experiences, so for example your shifts or your type or anything, if it changed as you grow older.
As a child, I experienced far more phantom shifts, and as a teenager, I experienced far stronger mental shifts. As I got older, these faded in intensity, though I still do experience them both very frequently. As a child, it was also far more acceptable to use play as an excuse to act out shifts. Now, as an adult, I mostly keep urges and feelings under wraps.
The only thing I would say that has changed is that shifts have become a more regular occurrence with ups and downs in frequency, perhaps overall less intense.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the experiences themselves, but the way I think of them and approach them have very definitely loosened up as I've loosened up.
Well, yeah, in 1978, I stopped experiencing shifts. Before that, I was a dissociator, and so that was a big change. The last almost 40 years, I have had no shifts.
Did your therianthropy have an influence on your sexual development as a Therian?
I actually believe that my sexuality had an impact on my therianthropy. Humans born with female biology that are fertile and healthy actually go into a monthly heat. This heat in humans is a time in their menstrual cycle known as ovulation. Basically, it causes hormone-induced behavior changes in the female and pheromone-induced behavior changes in the people around them. With that in mind, you may be able to see why those psychological factors may affect behavior amidst a mental shift and maybe even trigger heat or nesting type behaviors. I know it does for me.
Yes. Just yes.
If anything could be said to have been lifelong for me, it's my interest in werewolves and physically transforming into something else and things like that, of which the turn-on aspects are a part of it. And I'm not willing to say there isn't a connection, given that it's at least somewhat common with some of the folks I've talked to with the deeper experiences,
I've had several lovers. Some of those were mainstreamers. And I did enjoy being around them, but I never really felt terribly comfortable about it. As I am right now, will only have a significant relationship with another Therian.
Did being a Therian have an influence on your work life, your relationship, your children, living condition, or anything?
Being an alter human hasn't negatively affected my work life. It does trigger shifts often, but I don't have any trouble with these shifts, and sometimes they're actually beneficial to my performance in the workplace.
It does have an influence in work life and relationship. Shift activity increased while at work, particularly if there's a lot of restless energy or stress about, relationship was driven by desire to find another that could understand and accept the part of me.
Some people I met on Horror Werewolves way back when, I'm still in touch with today. They live close enough now that we're able to meet up for, board game nights or what have you.
I was open about my therianthropy in my professional life. I did a lot of things in the community. I helped several different social organizations. I was the chairperson for the Dallas County Department of Human Resources Quality Assurance team. I worked with the Boy Scouts. I helped found the local chapter of the Christian Motorcyclist Association. It never got in the way. In fact, sometimes people were sort of excited about knowing a werewolf.
Do you think that you have different experiences now as an adult, as a Therian, than younger people?
My history of uncertainty and still being unsure has made me feel more serious about all of this. The feeling that, I've had to, scratch and claw to get to even to the minor point I am now. Whereas, because of widespread internet ad, it's possible to come in a lot purer about yourself than it was back then.
No, I think that the biggest difference is my connection. A lot of the online younger people have never met a Therian before in real life. And I think that's something that tends to hold people back.
Does being an adult Therian actually have any struggles for you?
Finding a romantic partner. You have to find somebody that is willing to accept those pieces of you unconditionally, and that can feel like a massive hurdle to try to leap.
I would argue that brings less struggles. You care less about fitting in and how that puts you at odds with your therianthropy.
My personal prejudice is the expectation that as you get older, you're supposed to be more mature, you're supposed to understand things better, you're supposed to know more.
Right now, if you would look back to yourself, what advice would you give to yourself?
I would want younger me to know that it's okay not to fit in somewhere as a perfect, stereotypical teenage typecast model. That isn't how life works, and you need to convince yourself that that's okay. The most important thing is to come to terms with who you are, be comfortable with who you are, and to do it for your own sake.
My advice is get independent faster. Find love and understanding later. You'll be far more flexible that way, and you'll get to explore your therianthropy sooner in a much better environment. You'll get to know yourself better that way.
I guess I would tell my 19-year-old self that the way you think about yourself right now, the way you think about the world, attitude of, I don't deserve to be Therian, is shutting you off from a lot.
You don't need to be hyper-focused on anything except learning yourself. I am a big fan of Socrates, and his mantra was know thyself. An unexamined life is not worth living.
Do you have any specific advice for current younger Therians in the Therian community?
It's okay to be angry, sad, happy, shifty, and everything else in between about any given situation. I only ask that you not let your emotions control you either.
If you can reasonably do so, are able to support yourself and have no reason not to, get your own place. It's great to have a place you can call your own and not worry about intrusion. It provides an environment which you can develop yourself free of distraction or fear.
Get out of the bubbles and the comfort zones. I realize they're easy to get into. I realize they're comforting. There's a lot of value in them, but at the same time, you understand more about yourself and the world the more you understand about other people.
If you can tell the younger people, or even just anyone in general in the Therian community right now, to change or do something with the Therian community, what would you advise them to do with it?
Use your common sense, please, and please do not bite people regardless of what kind of urge you have. Do always be in control. Do not bite people.
Do not shut others out unless all other options have been exhausted. Shutting others out is an avoidance behavior and does not solve the issue that will go on to affect others. I know it can be tiresome, but keep an open mind, apply critical thinking, avoid taking statements and truth at face value, especially about other people.
Advance, that sort of open-mindedness when you can. Stepping outside the comfort zone and allowing other folks, not like you into it. The more people you give the initial chance to, the more likely you are to come across the ones that are valuable.
Do you have anything to say or to add or something?
As a final note, I just want to let younger Therians know that it's okay to change your mind. Everybody's been through that. I've unconfirmed types myself, and I'm sure most other people that you know have gone through those same processes.
I've noticed a trend of with or against us. The world is differing shades of gray. Unfortunately, not black and white, nor absolute good and evil. Life and people are far more complex than we'd like to reduce them to. Note how we lose a majority of the definition when we reduce to black and white. But as you add the shades of gray, it becomes more and more defined.
I think that one of the most important things that a Therian can do is get into real life with other Therians. It's almost magical. Things grow. For instance, my shamanism became stronger just by being around other Therians. Even though you get a bunch of Therians together, they don't talk about therianthropy, but they become more Therian when they're around other Therians.
I would like to thank you, PD, for having me on.
I'm glad we were able to figure this out.
Well, thank you for the interview.
Bye-bye. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, you have a great life.
And I will see the rest of you around the community.